Hi, my name is Everett. Today I'm reading number 23, High Time for Heroes, Magic Treehouse series, A Merlin Mission, by Mary Pope Osborne. Don't look down. Jack and Annie must find another secret of greatness for Merlin the Magician. This time they are on a mission. Takes the time traveling paired the River Nile in Egypt in mid-1800s. They're looking for an unusual hero in history, the world's greatest nurse, Florence Nightingale. But when Jack and Annie find the famous woman, they discover that she's unhappy with her life and can't help them. Can they help her instead? And could a baby baboon, a bad accident, and a few daring acts of Hermione help them all? Mary Pope Osborne blends, chills, thrills, and spills in another amazing edition in the best-selling Magic Treehouse series. So, here we go. Prologue. One summer day in Frog Creek, Pennsylvania, a mysterious treehouse appeared in the woods. It was filled with books. A boy named Jack and his sister Annie found the treehouse and soon discovered that it was magic. They could go to any time and place in history just by pointing to a picture in one of the books. While they were gone, no time at all passed back in Frog Creek. Jack and Annie eventually found out that the treehouse belonged to Morgan Le Fay, a magical librarian from the legendary realm of Camelot. They have since traveled on many adventures in the magic treehouse and completed many missions for both Morgan Le Fay and her friend Merlin the Magician. Now Merlin needs Jack and Annie's help again. He wants them to travel through time and learn 4 secrets of greatness from people who are called great by the world. Jack and Annie have completed 2 of the 4 missions. They took a trip to ancient Macedonia, where they spent time with Alexander the Great and his war horse Bucephalus. They visited Coney Island in 1908 and saw Harry Houdini and his wife Bess perform a magic show. Back in Frog Creek, they are waiting to find out where Merlin the Magician will send them to find the next secret of greatness. Chapter 1. I Know Her. Jack sat in a sunny spot on the front porch studying a book of magic tricks. He was planning to put on a magic show for his parents and grandparents. He took a sip of lemonade and started making a list in his notebook. Flying paperclip. Hey, Annie tapped on the screen door. Let's do something. I'm already doing something, said Jack. He took another sip of lemonade and added more tricks to his list. Magical cleaning pen. Great pepper trick. Annie gasped. Did you hear that? She asked. Annie opened the door and came out on the front porch. Hear what? Asked Jack. He added another trick. Steal the strength trick. That whooshing sound, said Annie. Whooshing sound, said Jack. Jack read his list and decided he needed 2 or 3 more tricks. Like the treehouse just whooshed into the woods, said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. He flipped through the pages of his book. Come on, go with me, Annie pleaded. Let's check the woods again, please. We've already checked 5 times since Tuesday, said Jack. Once more won't kill you, said Annie. I have a feeling. I'm serious. Jack sighed. Okay, you win, he said 1 more time. He put his notebook and pencil into his backpack and leaving his book of magic tricks on the porch, he stood up and followed Annie down the steps across the yard. Aren't you dying to find another secret of greatness for Merlin? Annie asked as they headed up the sidewalk. And what about the magic mist? Don't you want to have another great talent for 1 hour? Of course, said Jack, but I'm also tired of looking for the treehouse and not finding it. For 2 weeks you've had these hunches. Jack and Annie crossed their street and headed into the Frog Creek woods. Winding through the shadows and trees, Jack took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of warm earth and summer leaves. Hiding birds sang from the treetops. As Jack and Annie drew closer to the tallest oak, Jack's heart began to pound. This time something was there, high in the branches of the tree. Whoosh, Annie said softly. Jack grinned as he looked up at the small wooden house nestled high in the branches. Okay, he said. I'm glad we checked. Annie ran to the rope ladder and started up. Jack followed. Inside the magic treehouse, shadows of branches danced on the wooden walls. A piece of paper, a gold ring, a tiny bottle, and a small book and a scroll were waiting on the floor. A new message from Merlin, said Annie. She picked up a scroll, unrolled it, and read aloud. Dear Jack and Annie, I hope you enjoyed your time with the Houdinis. I ask you now to find the 3rd secret of greatness from a woman named Florence Nightingale. M. Florence Nightingale, said Annie. I know her. I gave a report on her. I just know her name. Who is she? Said Jack. She's amazing. She's one of my heroes, said Annie. Okay, yeah, but what did she do? Asked Jack. Florence Nightingale lived in the 1800s in England, said Annie. The English army was fighting in the place called Crimea on the Black Sea, and Florence Nightingale was a nurse there. The soldiers called her the Lady with the Lamp, because after the hospital was quiet and dark at night, she went alone from bed to bed with a lantern. She gave light and comfort and took care of wounds. She was so brave and amazing, she became famous everywhere. Later, she changed the world of nursing by organizing. Okay, you don't have to give your whole report, Jack interrupted. I get the picture. She sounds cool. Let's go meet her. I feel like I already know her, said Annie with a laugh. Oh, wow, I can't wait. So, let's see where we're going, said Jack. He picked up the small book from the floor. Its faded leather cover had an old-fashioned look. I'll bet it's about England, said Annie, or the Crimea. Neither, said Jack. He showed the cover to Annie. Egypt, Traveler's Handbook. Egypt, said Annie. I've never read that Florence Nightingale was a nurse in Egypt. We've been to Egypt before, said Jack. Remember the mummy in the pyramid? The ghost queen, said Annie. She was on her way to the next life. Jack shivered. That was weird, he said. Don't worry, the ghost queen was thousands of years in the past, said Annie. Now we're just going to 1850. Oh, right, said Jack dryly. I guess all the ancient ghosts were gone by then. Whatever, ready, said Annie. Hold on, said Jack. He picked up the gold ring and gave it to Annie. It's your turn to wear this, he said. Annie slipped the ring onto her finger. They both stared at it for a moment. The ring was magic. When Florence Nightingale shared a secret of greatness with them, it would glow like a burning ember. The ring of truth, said Annie. Yep. Just remember to keep checking it when we're talking to Florence, said Jack. Don't worry, I will, said Annie. Here, you carry this. She picked up the tiny glass bottle and handed it to Jack. Jack held the bottle up to the dappled sunlight and looked at the vapor swirling inside. Mist gathered at the first light on the first day of the blue moon on the Isle of Avalon, he said. Yep, good for 1 hour of great talent, said Annie. Jack smiled, remembering their hour as horse trainers and hour as stage magicians. I wonder what will be great at this time, he said. Maybe great nurses, said Annie. We'll see, said Jack. He put the tiny bottle into his pack. Then he picked up the piece of paper on the floor. On the paper he had written the 2 secrets of greatness they'd already learned. Humility, hard work. Ready to find the 3rd secret of greatness from Florence Nightingale, he asked. 1,000 times yes, said Annie. Jack pointed to the cover of the book. I wish we could go there, he said. The trio started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 2. Welcome to Thebes. Warm, dry air filled the treehouse. Jack wore a helmet-type hat, leather boots, and a long-sleeved shirt, a pair of heavy linen pants with a leather belt. A large pouch was attached to the belt. I wish I was dressed like you, said Annie, making a face. She was wearing a long white dress with frilly lace. You look like a cool explorer. I look like I'm going to a tea party. Don't feel bad, said Jack. My clothes are really scratchy and heavy. Hee-haw, is that a donkey? Asked Annie. She and Jack looked out the window. The tree house. Leaves and branches completely blocked their view. I think we've landed in a sycamore tree, said Jack, studying the leaves. Annie pushed some branches aside. All they could see below were more leaves, but straight ahead in the distance was a wide plain dotted with sand-colored ruins. Beyond the plain, mountains loomed against the cloudless blue sky. The Egyptian sun was blindingly bright. Hee-haw! That's definitely a donkey, said Annie. Let's go look. She gathered up her long white dress and started down the rope ladder. Jack stuck the small handbook into his leather pouch. He saw that his notebook, pencil, and his bottle of magic mist were also inside the pouch, along with some coins that showed images of pharaohs. Hey, we've got some Egyptian money, he called down to Annie. Great! Come on down, said Annie. She was already on the ground. Jack buckled his pouch. They clumsily climbed down the rope ladder in their leather boots. As soon as they stepped onto the grass, flies landed on his face. He shook his head and waved his hands, trying to brush them away. The sycamore tree was surrounded by bushes and other plants on a lush green river bank. Across the river, several dozen sailboats were anchored near a temple. Hee-haw! The sound came from beyond the bushes. Jack and Annie stepped around them and peeked out. Hey! 2 donkeys of them, said Jack, and there's a little kid with them. About 50 feet down the river, 2 small donkeys were standing under a cluster of palm trees. They were shaking their long furry ears and swishing their tails to keep the flies away. A boy was napping in a rowboat near the riverbank. He wore a striped robe. "Want to talk to him?" said Annie. "Sure," said Jack. They walked out of the bushes and headed toward the boy. "Hello," Annie called. The boy scrambled out of the rowboat. He looked to be about 6 or 7. "I did not see you coming," he said. "Welcome to Thebes. My name is Ali. Do you need donkeys and a guide?" "No thanks," said Jack. "My grandfather is the best guide in Thebes," Ali said with pride. "He is returning now with 2 travelers from England. There he is, on the horse." In the distance, a white-bearded man wearing a turban was riding a pack horse. He was leading a man and woman on donkeys toward the river. "My grandfather rows them across the Nile to their boat. He can guide you to the tombs and the cliffs," said Ali, "or the temples in Luxor." He pointed to the temple across the river. "Thanks, maybe later," said Jack. "We are here every day. Come back," said Ali. Then he ran to meet his grandfather and the travelers from England. "We just learned a lot," said Jack to Annie. "It seems we landed in Egypt on the river Nile, across from the temples of Temple of Luxor." "Sounds like a fairy tale," said Annie. Jack pulled out the Egypt book. He found the Thebes and read aloud. "Travelers enjoy visiting the area of Thebes, Egypt. 4,000 years ago, the Egyptian city was the capital of the known world. It was the noisiest and liveliest place on the river Nile." "Seriously?" said Jack. He looked around at the quiet riverbank, the donkeys, and the distant bare mountains. "I guess times have changed for Thebes," said Annie. "No kidding," said Jack. "So I wonder what Florence Nightingale is doing here." "Nursing," said Annie. "She has to be. That's what she's famous for." "Maybe those English travelers know something about her." She pointed to the couple riding with Ali's grandfather. "Remember, Florence Nightingale was in England too." Jack and Annie watched the 3 riders arrive at the riverbank. Ali's grandfather climbed out off his pack horse and helped the couple off their donkeys. As Ali and his grandfather gave donkeys water, the English woman noticed Jack and Annie. "Hello, children," she called, waving. Jack and Annie waved back, and the couple headed toward them. "How delightful to see new faces in Thebes," said the woman. "Yes," said the man, smiling. "Who are you? Where are you from?" The man and woman were both stout and middle-aged, but they had a young, exuberant air about them. "I'm Annie, and he's Jack, my brother," said Annie. "We're from Frog Creek, Pennsylvania." "Americans, wonderful," said the woman. "We are from England. My name is Selina Bracebridge. I am traveling with my husband, Charles." "And I am that very Charles," said Charles. "With who are you 2 traveling?" "Our parents," said Annie, "but they left us on our own in Thebes. They said to visit the ruins," said Jack. "They said it would be a great educational experience." "What a brave American children you are," said Selina. "And what unusual appearance." "Indeed. And where are you brave American children staying?" asked Charles. Up the Nile, that way," said Annie. She waved her hand vaguely toward the treehouse. "In a little house. It's sort of like an inn." "I see. Good," said Charles. "Well, can we do anything to help you with your Thebes educational experiments?" Jack could tell the man was joking, but Annie answered right away. "Actually, you can help us," she said. "Have either of you heard of a woman named Florence Nightingale? At the place we're staying, someone said she was in Thebes." Selina's eyes widened. "Charles, did you hear that? They're looking for Flo." Jack looked at Annie, then back at Charles and Selina. "You know Florence Nightingale?" he said. "Know her? She's our best friend," said Selina. "She's traveling with us, for goodness sake." She pointed up at the sailboats anchored along the river. "For many weeks now, she has been sailing up and down the Nile with us in our boat," said Charles. "That is amazing," Jack said to Annie. "Totally," he said. "How do you 2 know Flo?" asked Selina. "Well, we don't exactly know her," said Annie, "but we know she's a world-famous nurse." "A what?" asked Selina. "A world-famous nurse," said Annie. "Like a nurse in a hospital." Charles and Selina both laughed. Oh no, said Selena. Not Flo. She helps sick relatives and villagers in their homes, but she's not the least bit famous for that, and she certainly never worked in a hospital, said Charles. I'm afraid you have found the wrong Florence Nightingale. Oh, said Jack. How many Florence Nightingales can there be, he wondered. But your Flo's a great person, right, said Annie. We certainly think so, said Selena. Well, then we'd still like to meet her, said Annie. Righto, said Selena. Flo is visiting the Temple of Luxor this morning. Why don't you come with us to our boat and wait for her to come back? Oh, thank you, said Annie. Excellent, said Charles. Mustafa, shall we be off? Across in his boat, he turned to the bearded guide and his grandson. Mustafa, shall we be off? He called. Goodbye, Ali. The boy waved goodbye, and his grandfather pulled the rowboat partway into the water. Children first, said Charles. Mustafa held the rowboat steady as Jack and Annie climbed aboard and sat down. They helped Charles and Selena aboard and climbed after them. Once everyone was settled, Mustafa pushed off with the oars and started rowing across the Nile. As the boat glided over the shining, sparkling water, the old Egyptians softly sang a song. Jack couldn't understand the words, but the song was soothing, sung in time rhythm to the movement of the oars. This is perfect, Annie whispered. Now all we have to do is spend time with Florence Nightingale and wait for the ring of truth to go. Yeah, but she's not a great nurse, whispered Jack, fanning away the flies. She's not famous for being great at anything. I know, that's a little confusing, whispered Annie. Look, children, said Charles. Isn't that a magnificent sight? He pointed to a large crocodile sunning itself on the river rock. Whoa, said Jack. Yikes, said Annie at the same time. The crocodile had a scaly green hide with black spots. Its green eyes glimmered as the rowboat passed by. Don't be alarmed, said Charles. In our experience now, crocodiles are completely harmless. Harmless crocodiles, thought Jack. I don't think so. Mustafa stopped singing as they reached the landing on the opposite riverbank. He climbed out of the rowboat and tied it up. Then he held Jack and Annie onto the riverbank. Selena and Charles followed. Charles handed some money to the guide. Thank you, Mustafa, he said. Please wait on the shore, as I believe Miss Nightingale plans to visit western Thebes later today, when it's a bit cooler. This way, children. Jack and Annie followed Charles and Selena as they walked briskly along the landing, passing the line of sailboats moored at the water's edge. Whose boats are those? Asked Annie. They are rented by travelers from all over Europe, said Charles, most of whom are hiding from the midday heat right now. I don't blame them, thought Jack. The heat and the flies were almost more than he could bear. He felt sorry for the workers on the boat deck, scrubbing floors and mending sails. Here we are, said Selena. She and Charles stopped at a large boat anchored at the river. Home, sweet home. Chapter 30, Beast of the Nile. All aboard, said Charles. The English couple led the way across the short gangplank onto the deck of their sailboat. The boat had a long cabin and tall masts with a furled sail. Two crew members with white cloaks were mopping the decks. Miss Selena, one called. Lord and Lady Bickerson are waiting inside to visit with Miss Florence. Oh no, I didn't know they were coming, Selena said under her breath. Charles stopped and stroked his mustache. Excuse me, my dear, but while those particular folks are on board, I believe I shall take a stroll. Pleasure to meet you, Jack and Annie. He tipped his hat and retreated back down the gangplank. Coward, called Selena. Charles turned and saluted her from the riverbank. Do give my best to the Bickersons, darling. Ta-da, he said and took off. Who are the Bickersons? Asked Annie. Selena sighed. Lord and Lady Bickerson are aristocrats from London, she said. They're friends of Florence's family. Come and meet them, brave American children. It might be good for your educational experience. The boat rocked gently on the calm water as Jack and Annie followed Selena across the deck. Aristocrats? Annie whispered to Jack. That's like royalty, right? Sort of, said Jack. We have to act proper. No problem, said Annie. We've hung out with the Empress Termius III of Austria and King Philip II of Macedonia. Oh yeah, don't mention that to anyone, said Jack. Duh, said Annie. Selena stopped in front of one of the cabin doors and took a deep breath. Are you ready? She asked Jack and Annie. Yes, said Jack, eager to get away from the heat and away from the flies. Selena opened the door and motioned for Jack and Annie to follow her. They walked into a small sitting room with green-paneled walls and dark woodwork. It took a moment for Jack's eyes to adjust to the shadowy room. It was much cooler inside than outside, but the red-faced man and woman sitting stiffly on straight-back chairs were fanning themselves frantically. Lord and Lady Bickerson, hello. I'm sorry that Florence is not here yet. I'm sure that she will be back soon, said Selena. But in the meantime, please meet Jack and Annie from America. Hello, said Jack with a bow. Greetings, my lord. Greetings, my lady, said Annie with a curtsy. The aristocrats barely nodded. They fanned themselves harder. Have a seat, children, said Selena. Jack and Annie sat on the edge of the sofa. Jack tried to keep his back as straight as he could. When he saw Lady Bickerson's scowl at his hat, he quickly pulled it off. How are your lordship and ladyship today? Asked Selena. The two aristocrats spoke at once. Terrible and wretched, said Lord Bickerson. Burning up, said his wife. Oh, I'm so sorry, said Selena, but Jack noticed that she didn't sound sorry at all. We saw a dreadful beast this morning, said Lady Bickerson. A dreadful beast? Selena repeated. Yes, a crocodile, said Lord Bickerson, and a servant told us that a hippopotamus was spotted up river yesterday. Now hippos you kill people, you know, and the Egyptian jackals have been seen recently too. They come out at night and slay small animals. He looked at Jack and Annie. They have even been known to attack children. Furthermore, our servants have been telling us about the snakes in Egypt, said Lady Bickerson. The black mammoth, for instance. One bite from that monster contains enough poison to kill 20 people. Oh my, let's hope, began Selena. Of course, the biggest killer in this land is a vicious little mosquito, Lord Bickerson interrupted. Egyptian mosquitoes can carry terrible diseases. Malaria, for one, fever, coma, death. Oh, such misery, said Selena. Yes, aren't we all terrible, miserable, and frightened and thieves, said Lady Bickerson. Actually, I'm not miserable or frightened, Annie said thoughtfully. We saw a crocodile today, too, but it was harmless. She smiled at Lord and Lady Bickerson. They stared back at Annie as if she were a little mosquito. Suddenly, a servant threw open the door and stood at attention and spoke in a loud voice. Countess von Kensky. A glamorous-looking woman draped in red silk shawl bustled in. Her dark hair was piled high on her head. On her shoulder was a tiny monkey. The monkey looked like a little elf with wrinkled face, big pointed ears, and bushy eyebrows. Oh, look, it's so cute, cried Annie. Countess von Kensky, I believe you have met Lord and Lady Bickerson, said Selena. Oh, yes, said the Countess, nodding to the Bickersons, but neither Cuckoo nor I have met the lovely children. Who are you? Jack and Annie from America, said Annie. Delightful, said the Countess. Jack and Annie, this is Cuckoo von Kensky. I am a Budapest, Hungary, but this is a baby baboon from the Sudan in Africa. Cuckoo, say hello. As the Countess leaned down toward Jack and Annie, Cuckoo grabbed Jack's ear with her tiny fingers and yanked hard. Ow, said Jack. The baby baboon grinned as if she thought Jack was funny. Cuckoo, no, no, said the Countess, pulling Cuckoo's hand from Jack's ear. A big no-no, thought Jack, rubbing his ear. Oh, said the baboon, looking at Jack with her big eyes. Oh, yourself, said Annie, laughing and reaching out to pet Cuckoo. Careful, child, she'll bite you, said Lord Bickerson. Excuse me, my lord, but my darling Cuckoo never bites, said the Countess. The look on the Bickerson's face grew even more sour as Annie rubbed the baboon's spiky, hairy little head. Cuckoo stared at Annie with bright, curious eyes. Then she let out a shrill screech. Annie screeched back at her. Everyone laughed, except, of course, the Bickersons, who now glared at Annie and Cuckoo as if they were both little mosquitoes. Before the Bickersons could speak, the door opened again. A tall, slender woman stepped inside. Clutching a notebook, she was breathless, sunburned, and smiling. But her smile quickly turned to a look of dismay when she saw all the visitors. "Florence!" finally exclaimed Selina. Florence Nightingale wore a plain gray dress. Her brown hair was parted in the middle. "Hello, Florence, my dear," Lord Bickerson said. "Please sit down." Florence took a seat, then smiled politely. "Greetings, my lord and lady," she said. Her eyes softened as they rested on the Countess and the baby baboon. "Hello, Countess. How is our little cuckoo today?" "Very happy," said the Countess. "She just made 2 wonderful new friends from America." She nodded toward Jack and Annie. "Oh, hello," said Florence. "Hello," said Jack. Annie couldn't speak. She just stared at Florence with wide eyes and a big grin. "Flo, this is Jack and Annie," said Selina. "They want to meet you." Florence looked puzzled. "But why?" she said. "For some reason, they believe that you are a world-famous nurse who works in hospitals," said Selina. Florence looked curiously at Jack and Annie. "A world-famous nurse," she said. "How strange." "Strange indeed," said Lady Bickerson with a snort. "Work in a hospital? It's unthinkable." "Unthinkable, my lady?" said Florence. "Well, your mother and father would certainly find it so," Lord Bickerson said huffily. A sad expression crossed Florence's face as she looked back at Jack and Annie. "No, children," she said, "I am not a world-famous nurse. In fact, not even for one day worked in a hospital. My family would find it unthinkable." Selina jumped in to change the subject. "What Flo really loves is taking notes about the Egyptian ruins," she said to Jack and Annie. "That's why we make so wonderful traveling companions. She loves taking notes, and I love to sketch. Tell you guys about your morning, Flo." "I was at the Temple of Luxor," said Florence, brightening. "I studied the paintings, particularly the ones of Anubis." "Anubis?" said Jack. "The jackal god," said Florence. "He is on many tomb walls. Ancient Egyptians believed jackals protected the dead. I find that so fascinating." "That is fascinating," said Annie. Lady Bickerson shuddered. "I find it gruesome," she said. "It's not gruesome at all, my lady," said Florence. "I find Egyptian mythology to be quite beautiful." "I think so too," said Jack. "Beautiful?" said Lord Bickerson. "I do not know how one could find anything in this land beautiful, Florence. I cannot imagine why you all would want to prowl among these ghastly ruins." "Nor I," said Lady Bickerson. They all stink of rats and decay." "Oh, speaking of rats," said the Countess, "Coco and I saw one in our cabin last night. Neither of us could sleep or wink after that." "We never sleep," said Lady Bickerson. "Not with the rats and flies and fleas, and the dreadful singing from our crew hurts my ears." "I'm sorry you find everything so distasteful, my lady," said Florence. "It makes me wonder why you and your lordship chose to travel to Egypt in the first place." "Why, these days it's considered quite fashionable to visit Egypt," said Lady Bickerson. "Though now Lord Bickerson and I can't possibly understand why." "I adore Egypt," said Florence, "and I feel that I must defend her. Egypt and I quite agree with each other." "Indeed," said Lord Bickerson. "You adore Egypt, she agrees with you, and you feel you must defend her. You certainly seem to have an excellent opinion of yourself, Miss Florence." "No, said Miss Nightingale. I keep losing my... "You certainly seem to have an excellent opinion of yourself, Miss Florence." Florence Nightingale took a deep breath, then she sang quietly. "No, in truth, I do not have an excellent opinion of myself, my lord." "I have an excellent opinion of you," Annie whispered. An awkward silence filled the room. "Forgive me," said Florence. "I am not feeling well. I must return to my own cabin. I fear I must." And with that, Florence Nightingale rose from her chair and slipped silently out of the room. Chapter 4. Baboon Babysitters. Everyone was silent for a moment after Florence left. The Bickersons were the first to speak. "Well," said Lady Bickerson. "How utterly rude," said Lord Bickerson. "Excuse me for a moment while I check on Flo," said Selina, a worried look on her face. Perhaps the heat was too much for her today. And with that, Selina left the sitting room too. "Well," said Lady Bickerson again, "I hope I did not offend Miss Nightingale about complaining about the rat, said the Countess. I like her very much, Miss Nightingale, not the rat. You do not know Florence as we do, said Lord Bickerson. You have no idea of the trouble she has caused her family. It is shocking, said Lady Bickerson. She refuses to behave like a lady. She has her own thoughts and opinions. She tells her poor mother she has dreams to leave home so she can work. What's wrong with that? Asked Annie. Uh-oh, thought Jack. Annie sounded angry. No proper lady who works out in the world, Lord Bickerson snapped. Why not? Asked Annie. If you wanted to follow your dreams and people wouldn't let you, wouldn't you feel bad too? And what's wrong with having thoughts and opinions? I have thoughts and opinions all the time. What a rude child you are, said Lady Bickerson. Is that how your parents taught you to speak to your superiors? Jack was starting to get angry too. We don't have superiors at home, he said. Lord Bickerson glared at Jack and Annie. It is high time you children leave this boat, he said. Miss Nightingale does not even know who you are. None of us know who you are, or who your parents are. Excuse me, sir, but this is not your boat, is it? Said Annie. I thought it belonged to Charles and Selina. Oh, the aristocrats both gasped. Lord Bickerson strode to the door. Be gone, he said. You children are the very definition of the word impolite. Leave before I send for the local governor. He'll know what to do with you. Seriously, what does that mean, said Jack. It means go, said Annie, which I'm happy to do. Me too, said Jack. Jack and Annie stood up. As they headed for the door, Annie looked back at the Countess and her baby baboon. Goodbye, Countess. Goodbye, Cuckoo. It was great meeting you. Jack nodded in agreement. Must you leave, said the Countess. I fear we must, said Annie, echoing Florence. She curtsied and Jack bowed. Then they both headed out the door. Outside the sun was brighter and hotter than ever. Flies buzzed everywhere. Jack put his hat back on. Come on, let's get away from these beasts, he said. The flies or the aristocrats? Asked Annie. Both, said Jack. Jack and Annie headed over the gangplank over the river. They walked toward some shade trees at the edge of the Nile. Send for the local governor? Seriously, said Jack. Their behavior was unthinkable, said Annie. The very definition of the word impolite. Jack laughed, but then he sighed. We blew it, he said. We got sidetracked. How can we complete our mission now? Don't worry. We'll wait for the Bickersons to leave, said Annie. Then we'll try to get back on board and visit with Florence. Okay, sounds like a plan, sort of, said Jack. Come on, let's wait on that big rock under that tree, said Annie. Jack and Annie headed toward the shady rock. Not far away, Mustafa was sitting next to his rowboat, reading a book. The guy looked up, gave them a nod, then went back to his reading. Across the river, Ali was resting with his donkeys. Could you believe the way those two talked about Florence, said Annie. She can't be a nurse. She can't work outside her home. She can't even have her own opinions. How can you become great if people make you feel bad about yourself? And did you notice how they tried to make us afraid of everything? That was crazy. Yeah, crazy, said Jack. But the aristocrats' warnings had gotten to him. He was on the alert for all the beasts of the Nile. What do black mambas look like, he wondered. Do jackals come out during the day? When he heard a whine of a mosquito, he shook his head as if his hair was on fire. What's wrong with you, said Annie. Before Jack could answer, he heard a loud call. Wahoo! Jack and Annie jumped up and whirled around. Cuckoo! Cried Annie. The baby baboon was scrambling toward them on all fours. Countess von Kensky was hurrying after them. Cuckoo, wait, she called. Cuckoo leaped into Annie's arms. Oh, hello! Cried Annie, hugging the baby baboon. She wanted to find you, said the Countess, out of breath. After they left, she screeched at the Bickersons. She even shook her little fist, so they ordered her off the boat too. Now the poor couple is sitting there all alone. Oh, thank you, Cuckoo, for sticking up for us, said Annie. I can see that Cuckoo likes you and that she likes you, said the Countess. Therefore, I have a favor to ask you. Could you care for her this afternoon? I must take a ferry downriver to see a sick friend, but I cannot take Cuckoo. My friend is afraid of creatures from the wild. Of course we'll take care of her, said Annie. Annie, you know we have a mission, right? Jack said under his breath. Their job was to find a seeker of greatness, not to babysit a baboon. Don't worry, Cuckoo won't get in the way, Annie said to Jack. She looked back at the Countess. We'd love to. Thank you. Thank you very much. I trust you to be wonderful caretakers, said the Countess. She reached into her purse, brought out a chunk of brown bread, and gave it to Jack. Please give her bits of this when she is hungry, or sad. I won't be back until nightfall. Where can we rendezvous then? Rendezvous? Asked Annie. Yes, meet up with each other, said the Countess. How about Selena's boat, said Jack. Good, good. You two are angels who are dropped from heaven. Thank you so very much, said the Countess. Be good, Kaku. And she hurried down the river to catch her ferry. Woo, said Kaku, looking after the Countess. Don't be sad, baby, said Annie, sitting back on the rock. Your mom won't be gone long. Woo, said the baboon. She settled into Annie's lap, and Annie kissed her head. Would Kaku like a snack? Jack asked. He broke off a piece of bread and gave it to her. He put the rest in his pouch. Kaku held the bread with her tiny two hands. She chewed thoughtfully, looking from Jack to Annie with her bright eyes. She uttered funny little noises between bites. Suddenly she screeched and pointed up the river. Jack and Annie turned and looked. Florence had left Charles and Selena's boat. Carrying a small bag, she was walking quickly down the river bank to Mustafa. Now's our chance, said Jack. Let's go, said Annie. Holding Kaku, she hurried with Jack to Florence and the guide. I'd like to explore the Valley of the Queens, Florence was saying to Mustafa as Jack and Annie approached. Hi there, said Annie. Florence turned around. She looked startled. Oh, hello, she said. Kaku let out another screech. We're babysitting Kaku, Annie explained. Florence nodded. Jack could tell she didn't really want to talk to them. Are you going to take some more notes this afternoon, said Annie. Yes, I am, Florence said. You're just like Jack, said Annie. He loves to write his notebook, too. Oh, how nice, said Florence. Jack was embarrassed. Florence's mind was clearly on other things. She nodded politely and then turned back to the guide. Shall we be off, Mustafa? Mustafa helped row Florence into the rowboat and took his position as the guide picked up his oars. Florence glanced back at Jack and Annie and Kaku. They were all just standing on the bank staring at her. Florence sighed. Do you need a ride to the western shore? She said. Yes, please, said Annie. Then come, said Florence. You are welcome to join us. Thanks, said Annie. Jack didn't say anything. He didn't feel welcome at all. Jack and Annie climbed in with Kaku and sat behind Florence. Mustafa used his oars to push off the boat off the riverbank. As he began rowing across the Nile, the white-bearded guide sang the same peaceful song he had sung before. Annie gave Jack a thumbs-up sign. Not really, thought Jack. Florence was sitting with her back to them now, writing in a notebook. How could they ever get her attention to them? Look up Valley of the Queens, Annie whispered to Jack. Jack took the handbook out of his pouch and his belt. Then he and Annie silently read. About 3,000 years ago, the wives of the pharaohs were buried in the Valley of the Queens near the Valley of the Kings. The tombs were cut out of limestone cliffs. Excuse me, Miss Nightingale, said Annie. Have you ever been to the Valley of the Queens? Without looking back, Florence shook her head. We find it fascinating, said Annie. She nudged Jack, letting him know it was his turn to speak. Did you know that the wives of the pharaohs were buried there about 2,000 years ago? Said Jack. I believe their tombs were cut of limestone cliffs. Florence barely nodded. She didn't say a word or look back at them. Before Jack or Annie could think of another way to get their attention, the rowboat arrived at the western shore. Chapter 5, Valley of the Queens. Miss Nightingale, your donkey, Allie called out. The small boy stood up with a donkey and a larger pack horse. How lovely to see you, Allie, said Florence. Mustafa stepped into the shallow water and pulled the rowboat onto the bank. Then he helped everyone out of the boat. Jack and Annie stood with Kaku and watched Florence mount the donkey. Mustafa climbed onto the pack horse. Jack felt helpless. He didn't know how to stop Florence from leaving them. Have a nice afternoon, said Annie. Florence looked back at them. I hope you have a nice afternoon, too, she said. I would ask you to join me, but I'm afraid I need a bit of quiet and solitude right now. We understand, said Annie. Thank you, said Florence. Then she turned back to the guide. Lead the way, Mustafa. Mustafa and his horse headed away from the river. Florence followed on her donkey. Jack, Annie, and Kaku watched as they headed up the dirt road toward the distant Bear Mountains. Soon they disappeared from view. Darn, breathed Annie. Yeah, said Jack. Donkeys for you, too? Allie asked, coming up behind them. You can travel to the ruins without a guide, you know. Annie looked at Jack. Want to? She asked. How do we get to Valley of the Queens? Jack asked Allie. Very easy, said the boy, pointed to the road. Travel the same way they went, he said. Follow that road and never turn. That sounds simple, said Annie. Let's go. Wait, said Jack. He took all of his Egyptian coins from his pouch and showed them to Allie. Do we have enough to rent 2 donkeys? Oh, yes. Allie took only 1 coin. Good for 2 donkeys all afternoon, he said. Okay, we'll do it, said Jack. Yay, said Annie. Good. I will get them for you, said Allie. He headed to the donkeys standing under the trees. I wonder if there's anything we need to know about riding donkeys, said Jack. He opened their traveler's handbook again and looked up donkeys and read aloud. Donkeys were first trained to carry travelers over 6,000 years ago in Egypt. The animals are easy to ride, but the traveler must approach them slowly and treat them with kindness and affection. Easy, said Annie. That's the way I always treat animals. Hee-haw. Here they are, said Allie, leading 2 donkeys toward Jack and Annie. Both donkeys were sandy gray brown with sweet faces. Their saddles were blankets made of heavy cloth. Their long furry ears twitched to keep the flies away. Hello there, Annie said to one of the donkeys. You have ears like a rabbit. Can I call you Bunny? Oh, brother, said Jack. Tug to yours too, Annie coached Jack. Call her sweet name, kindness and affection. Remember? Jack rolled his eyes and scratched the ears of the donkey. Hi, honey, want to go for a ride? He said. The donkey nuzzled her head against Jack's hand. Allie laughed. I think my donkeys like you very much, he said. Holding Kaku, Annie climbed onto the back of Bunny while Jack climbed onto Honey. You must take water, said Allie. He tied tin canteens to the donkey's saddle. Come back before sundown. There are danger in the dark hills. After dark, like what kind of danger? Asked Jack. Like wild jackals. Tomb Raider, said Allie. Got it, said Jack. We'll be home before dark, said Annie. Way before dark, said Jack. Goodbye, Allie. Thanks, said Annie. Giddy up, Bunny. She led the way with Kaku on her shoulder. Follow them, honey, please, said Jack. The 2 donkeys left the lush green river bank and trotted up the same road that Mustafa and Florence had traveled. Our donkeys remind me of the camels we rode in Baghdad, said Annie. Remember Beauty and Cutie? Oh, brother, said Jack. Their camels had nearly ruined their mission. Bunny and Honey trotted past cornfields, palm trees, sheep, goats, and huts, and children playing in the dirt. When the children saw Jack and Annie, they laughed and pointed at the baboon riding on Annie's shoulder. Soon the dirt road opened onto a wide and rougher road and crossed a flat plain with bordered by the sand-colored mountains. The breeze blew clouds of dust on the donkey's clumped side over the dry, cracked earth. Through the giddy haze, Jack could see ruins scattered about on the plains, broken columns and chunks of ancient walls half buried in sand. Look, said Annie. The gigantic statue loomed ahead against the blue sky, enormous pharaohs on thrones as tall as 5-story buildings. Let's stop for a minute, Jack called back. He pulled on the donkey's reins and took out the travel handbook. He found a picture of the statues and read aloud. More than 3,000 years old, the colossi of Memnon once guarded the temple of Pharaoh. Memnon means ruler of the dawn. Ancient Egyptians believed one of the giant statues sang every day at sunrise. Jack took out his notebook and pencil and wrote, Memnon, ruler of the dawn. He looked at the ruins again. The pharaoh's temples had vanished with time. The statues were faceless, with bodies broken and worn away by thousands of years of wind and sand. The wounded giants still looked amazingly powerful, though. Through the dry heat, Jack could imagine their ancient song. Hee-haw, Jack jumped. What's that? A donkey up ahead somewhere, said Annie. Past those temple ruins. I'll look it up. It's Florence's donkey. I'll bet it's Florence's donkey. Hurry, let's go. Jack put away his notebook and pencil. And the handbook. Giddy up, he said, and his donkey started walking again. When we find Florence, try to act surprised so she won't think we're following her. Be cool. Don't worry, I'm always cool, said Annie. But we'll have to find a way to stick close to her. So we can find out her secret of greatness. Yeah, said Jack, sighing. The only problem is I'm having trouble seeing what makes her so great, he said. He thought Florence seemed unhappy and unfriendly. But she is great, said Annie. I know she is. Jack and Annie kept riding their donkeys through the heat and dust. When they stopped at the ruins of the ancient temple, there were no signs of Florence or Mustafa among the broken columns and crumbling walls. There was no signs of any living things. I don't see them, said Jack. We must have lost them somewhere. He shivered despite the heat. The quiet felt spooky to him. He grabbed his canteen and took a long drink of water. Annie did the same. She poured a bit of water into her cupped hand and offered it to Kaku. Do you think we should keep going to the Valley of the Queens, Annie asked. I guess so, said Jack. Florence and Mustafa are probably already there, said Annie. Giddy up, Bunny. As the donkeys walked toward the cliffs, Jack couldn't shake his uneasy feeling. Everything was the color of mud and sand. The only other living creatures was some vultures circling in the sky. As Jack stared up at the birds, Annie brought her donkey to a halt. Oh, wow, those must be the tombs of the Pharaoh's wives, said Annie. She pointed to several huge square holes carved into the limestone walls of the cliffs. Yeah, Jack shuddered. You know, I think I'd like to go back. This place gives me the creeps. Are you afraid of ghosts, said Annie? Jack shook his head. I don't know, maybe. Let's just go, he said. We can wait for Florence back at Charles and Selena's boat. Don't you at least want to peek inside one of those tombs, asked Annie. Nope, said Jack. Well, okay, you don't have to, said Annie. But if I don't take a look, I'll always wonder what I missed. Kaku and I will be right back. No, Annie, let's leave this place, said Jack. Just a teeny minute, said Annie. Holding on to the baby baboon, she climbed off her donkey. We'll just take a quick look and down. She pointed to the nearest tomb cut into the mountain. I promise we won't go inside. We'll hurry back. With Kaku sitting on her shoulder, Annie took off toward the tomb. Jack's donkey shook her head and kicked her hind legs. What's wrong, honey? Said Jack. Annie's donkey started acting strangely too. She brayed loudly and turned away from the cliffs. Calm down, Bunny, said Jack, trying to speak in a soothing voice. It's okay. Something was clearly bothering both animals. Jack's donkey tried to turn around, and Annie's donkey began trotting back the way they had come. Wait, Bunny, Jack called as Annie's donkey sped away. Annie, he shouted, come back! Now, Bunny's running off. Annie was standing at the entrance of the tomb. She turned around. What? She called. Kaku let out a bone-chilling shriek. From behind a pile of boulders near the tomb came two dirty gray-like, wolf-like animals. The two creatures looked at Annie, then loped in her direction. Oh, man, thought Jack. Jackals. Chapter 6. No big deal. Annie turned and saw the jackals running toward her. Oh, no! She cried. Shrieking, Kaku leaped from Annie's arms and bounded across the dry, cracked ground. When the jackals saw the baby baboon, they stopped, and then cackling and yelping, they took off after her. Kaku screeched and bolted toward the mountain. The jackals were right behind her. No! Screamed Annie. She tore after Kaku and the jackals. At Annie, Jack yelled. He jumped off his donkey and ran after her. From a distance, Jack saw the baby baboon disappear into a crack between the two cliffs. Howling and cackling, the jackals followed Kaku. They slipped into the crack and vanished from sight. Annie was racing to catch up. Jack was far behind. When he finally reached her, Annie was desperately trying to squeeze through the narrow opening. We can't fit through that, said Jack. We have to save Kaku, Annie cried. They heard shrieking, yelping, and cackling above them. Then gradually all the sounds faded away. Kaku! Screamed Annie. Then silence. Dead silence. Oh no, I think they got her, Annie wailed. I think they got her, Jack. She burst into tears. Kaku! Kaku! She repeated, sobbing. Jack didn't know what to say. Everything had happened so fast. Suddenly, then he heard another sound. Wahoo! Annie! Jack grabbed Annie's shoulder and shook her. Listen! Annie put her hand over her mouth. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she listened. Wahoo! The sound came from high above them. Jack and Annie stepped back and looked up the steep cliff. Kaku was at the very top, jumping up and down and screeching at them. "She made it!" cried Annie. "She got away! Kaku, come down, come down!" "Where are the jackals?" said Jack. "I'll bet it's too steep for them to climb up after her," said Annie. "Kaku, come down!" The baby baboon paced back and forth along the edge of the cliff, crying. "We have to save her," said Annie. "She's afraid to come down." Kaku screeched and waved her arms. "We can't climb up there. It's too steep." "We have to try," said Annie. "We're not rock climbers," said Jack, looking at the steep wall of limestone. "Only the best rock climbers in the world could get up there." "We can do that," said Annie. "We can be great rock climbers." "You can't just be one," said Jack. "You have to go through lots of training and practice." "The mist," said Annie. "We can use the magic mist and wish to be great rock climbers." "Use the mist," said Jack. They could only use the mist once, and it was supposed to help them with their mission. But when he looked up at the baby baboon crying and waving her arms, saving Kaku seemed more important than anything. "Okay, we'll use the mist to get her down, but we might have to walk back. I'll bet both our donkeys have run far by now." "No problem," said Annie. "No problem, we can do that," said Annie. "Hurry before the jackals come back." Jack reached into his leather pouch and pulled out the tiny bottle. He uncorked the top. "Here it goes," said Jack. "I wish to be a great rock climber." He slowly inhaled the magic mist. His nostrils filled with the scent of mountain air and cold moving water. The fresh, clean smell filled him with strength and energy. Jack handed the bottle to Annie. "I wish to be a great rock climber," she exclaimed. She inhaled the mist too. Then she gave the bottle back to Jack. He corked it and put it away. Jack and Annie looked up at the steep wall of limestone cliff. "No big deal," said Jack. "Easy," said Annie. She called up to the baby baboon. "We're coming, Kaku. Don't worry, we'll save you." "We have 1 hour to climb up and back down," said Jack. "First we need to take off our boots so our toes can fit into the cracks." "Right-ho," said Annie. She and Jack coolly slipped off their boots and stockings. "Okay, now we follow the 3 basic rules of rock climbing," said Jack. "We look, we think, we move." "Got it," said Annie. Jack and Annie moved about 20 feet apart. They each studied the cliff wall as if it were a giant map. Jack looked for cracks, ledges, bumps, and holes. After he charted his route in his mind, he took a deep breath. He lodged his toes of his left foot into the crack of the limestone. He reached high and gripped 2 tiny bumps on the wall with his fingers. Then he pulled himself up. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Annie doing the same thing. Jack and Annie climbed higher and higher up the wall. Jack took time to find new cracks for his toes. He slowly ran his hands over the face to find new bumps and ledges. He grabbed with his fingers, and as an expert rock climber, Jack knew exactly how to shift his body weight and when to relax his grip. Then he knew exactly when to push with his legs and when to pull with his hands. Annie was silently climbing up the cliff at the same time. But Jack didn't look at her or think of her. He completely ignored Kaku screeching from above. He kept all his attention and focused on finding new places to grip on the face of the cliff with his fingers and toes. Slowly and calmly, Jack gripped, pulled, and pushed his way up the face of the cliff. He climbed and climbed until he was only a few feet from the top. He couldn't see over the edge, but he gripped tightly and with his fingertips and hoisted himself higher. "Oh, woo!" Kaku poked her head over the cliff, breaking Jack's concentration. She reached down and grabbed Jack's ear. "Ow!" Jack yelled. His left hand lost its grip. His right foot slipped. Then his left foot slipped. Jack was hanging onto the ledge with one hand, and that hand was slipping. "Annie!" he yelled. Just as he was about to lose his grip and fall, he felt a hand clamp down on his right wrist. "Hold on!" cried Annie. She had reached the top ahead of him. Jack's fingers slipped from the ledge, but Annie held on tight to his wrist. They both, with both hands, and as he dangled high above the stone ground. Below, the baby baboon shrieked and vultures called in the cloudless sky. "You're still a great rock climber, Jack," Annie shouted. "You know how to do this." "I know how to do this," thought Jack. He clicked right back into thinking like an expert rock climber. He twisted himself toward the rock wall. He reached out with his free hand and secured its fingertips in a small crevice. He planted his bare toes into 2 ridges. "Okay, I'm good," Jack called. You can let go now. Annie released Jack's hand and quickly gripped the small bump on the rock face. He was very still for a moment, blocking out all sounds and thoughts. He waited for his breath to slow down. He waited for his legs to stop shaking and his body to relax. Using all his strength, Jack pulled himself up toward the his left leg over the rim of the limestone cliff. He gracefully pulled his whole body up and over the ledge. Whew, breathed Jack. He was safe. Chapter 7, Panic. Awoo! Kaku shrieked and jumped up and down. Annie slapped Jack on the back. You did it, she cried. We did it, Jack said, breathing hard. Thanks for saving me when I lost my grip. He shook his finger at the baby baboon. Bad time for an ear grab, Kaku von Kensky. Kaku pressed her lips against Jack's cheek and gave him a kiss. Ew, gross, said Jack, laughing. She's so happy we saved her, said Annie. Jack glanced down at the ground below the cliffs to make sure the jackals hadn't returned. Okay, let's rest a minute, said Jack. He sat back and closed his eyes and took a long deep breath. Kaku, would you like a treat, said Annie. Here, said Jack. He opened his eyes and reached into his pouch and took out a bit of bread. He gave it to Kaku. She chewed happily as the three of them sat together looking over the land of western Thebes. What a great view, said Jack. The sun was setting behind the honey-colored mountains, and the river Nile gleamed with golden light from the cornfields were golden too, as herds of sheep and goats headed home. Jack felt the same calm feeling he felt during his climb. He felt free of all his fears and worries. As the sky turned from gold to red to dark purple, the wind began to blow. The air grew cooler. Sand swirled around the two colossi of Memnon. Jack imagined the giant's breath was stirring the sand. He shivered and pulled out the handbook and looked up the map of Thebes. Okay, on the other side of the Nile are the temples of Karnak and Laxor, he said. He looked across the Nile to the distant temples. Beyond the temples, a full moon was starting to rise. Jack looked back at the map, and on this side of the Nile are the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of the Queens. Look, said Annie. She pointed to the fallen temples on the road to the river. Do you see two people? Sure enough, in the distance, two people were riding a horse and a donkey. It's them, said Jack. Florence and Mustafa. Maybe they can help us get back since we don't have any more donkeys. He stood up and waved his arms. Hello! Annie joined them. Hello! She yelled. But Florence and Mustafa didn't seem to hear them as they rode back toward the Nile. Hello! Annie called once more, but it was no use. Well, we'll just have to walk fast and catch up with them at the boat, said Jack. We still have time to get down, don't we, said Annie. I mean, our hour isn't up yet, is it? I don't know, said Jack. He couldn't believe he had forgotten about the time. How long did it take us to climb up? How long have we been sitting here? I don't know, said Annie. The sun had sank below the horizon and the sky was quickly growing darker. We have to hurry, said Jack, before our hour runs out, before you lose our rock climbing skills, before the hills get darker, before the hills become more dangerous. Relax, Jack, said Annie. Remember, rock climbers go slowly. We think we move. Right, said Jack. Right, okay. He took a deep breath and tried to slow his racing heart. He tried to think about running out of time or losing his rock climbing skills or the danger in the dark valley. You okay, Annie asked. Yes, said Jack. He looked over the edge of the cliff at the rock face. Jack realized he knew exactly what to do. No big deal, he said. No big deal, echoed Annie. Jack mapped out the route in his mind to the ground. He located bumps, ledges, holes, ridges, cracks, until he had a good plan. I'll carry Kaku on my back. She's not heavy, said Annie. I'll start down over there. She moved about 20 feet away from Jack. Don't forget, go slowly, she reminded Jack. And don't freak out. We think we move. Yeah, right, I know, said Jack. Just concentrate on yourself. Jack turned away from Annie and Kaku. He took a full deep breath. When he felt a perfect balance between calm and alert, he started down the cliff wall. Jack went smoothly along the face of the rock, shifting his weight and keeping his eyes on his feet, and he reached down to lower ledges with his toes and lodged his fingertips into cracks above. He kept his body straight and didn't lean too close to the wall. Jack knew exactly what to do until he was halfway down. Suddenly, he didn't know anything. Jack froze. His body started to shake. His toes slipped from the cracks they were in. Jack's hand slipped from the ridge he was gripping. He fell. Jack hit the ground so hard he couldn't breathe. His whole body screamed with pain, especially his right shoulder and arm. "Jack!" Annie cried out from above him. Then there was a terrible thud. Jack heard Kaku shrieking. He wanted desperately to help Annie and the baby baboon, but he was still struggling to breathe. He couldn't stand up. He couldn't move at all. Jackals started howling. It sounded like many more than just two. It sounded like a whole pack. The howling grew louder and then faded away. And Jack whispered. He couldn't even say her name. The wind made loud whistling sounds through the limestone cliffs. Jack was cold and scared. He worried that his bones were broken. He worried that Annie was hurt, or worse, maybe not alive. Kaku made whining, weeping sounds. Then Jack heard a moan. "Jack!" "Annie," Jack said hoarsely. In spite of the pain, he forced himself to sit up. He saw Annie on the ground lying not far from him. "I got the breath knocked out of me," she said, gasping. "Couldn't breathe or talk. Now my ankle. Oh," she groaned. "Hold on, don't move," said Jack. He struggled to a standing position. He discovered that he couldn't lift his right arm at all. It just hung limply at his shoulder from a strange angle. Jack took a deep breath. He clutched his bad arm and walked barefoot to Annie. He had no idea where they left their boots. It was too dark to find them now. "Oh," said Annie. She was lying on her side, holding her right ankle and moaning. "Can you stand up?" said Jack. "Maybe," said Annie. "I'll help you," said Jack. He used one hand to help Annie roll onto her back and stand up. "Ow!" she cried. Sorry, said Jack. Annie tried to laugh. "No, I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to yell, but it really hurts if I put weight on it. What can we do?" "How can we get back?" Don't worry, I can walk," said Jack. "You can lean on me and hop on one foot." "Are you sure you're not too badly hurt?" Annie asked. "No big deal," said Jack. "Just lean on my left side. We'll be fine." "Okay." Annie placed her arm on Jack's shoulder. "Here, Kaku, hold my hand tight," said Annie. She held out her left hand and the baby baboon grabbed it. "Ready, everyone?" Jack asked. "Ready," said Annie. "Good," said Jack. "Let's give it a try." Chapter 8, Moon Over the Nile. Jack took halting steps, supporting much of Annie's weight as she hopped on her left foot. His shoulder hurt terribly, but he tried to hide his pain from Annie. The Valley of the Queens felt spookier than ever. The jackals must be close by, Jack thought. And what about those tomb raiders that Allie had mentioned? "Do we know the way back?" Annie asked. "From the top of the cliff, we could see the moon rising over the Nile," said Jack. "So if we walk toward the moon now, we should come to the river." "Good idea," said Annie. Heading toward the moon and holding on to Annie, Jack kept walking slowly. "Ow, ow, ow," Annie said softly with each hop she took. Annie's hopping jostled Jack's right body, sending pain through his shoulder and arm. But Jack gritted his teeth and tried not to make a sound. He was afraid Annie wouldn't let him help her if she found out how much he was hurting. After only about 50 yards, Jack knew he couldn't support Annie's weight much longer. "Okay, let's stop and rest for a minute," he said. Kaku screeched and let go of Annie's hand and bounded away. "Kaku!" cried Annie. "Come back!" "Oh no, not again," thought Jack. "Did you hear jackals?" "Look, there's a light," said Annie. She pointed to a flickering light moving toward them. "We have to be quiet," whispered Jack. "It might be tomb raiders." "Tomb raiders?" said Annie, peering into the dark. "I don't think so." She called out, "We're here! We're over here! Help us!" "Children?" a woman called. "We're here!" Annie cried again. Kaku screeched and came running back toward Jack and Annie. She chattered and jumped up and down. Out of the dark, Florence Nightingale appeared on her donkey. She was wearing a shawl and holding a lantern. Mustafa followed behind her on his pack horse. "It's us, Jack and Annie," cried Annie. "Thank goodness," said Florence. "We've been looking all over for you. When we arrived at the river, Allie reported that your donkeys had returned without you." "We were trying to save Kaku from jackals," said Annie. She escaped from them, but then got stuck on the top of the cliff. "We got up there okay, but we fell coming down." "You poor things," cried Florence, climbing off her donkey. "Please bring water for them, Mustafa." Mustafa dismounted and untied 2 canteens from his saddle. Florence carried a lamp over to Jack and Annie. "Are you hurt, my dears?" she asked softly. "Yes, I hurt my ankle," said Annie. "I think Jack's in worse shape, even though he says no big deal." "It's just my shoulder and my arm," Jack explained to Florence. "Oh my goodness, you are lucky, both of you, to be alive," said Florence. She gently felt Jack's shoulder and arm. He went with pain and groaned. "Can you move it, dear?" she asked him. "No," said Jack. Mustafa handed Jack Nanny a canteen. While Jack Nanny gulped down water, Florence spoke softly to Mustafa. Let's take them straight to the boat, she said. Jack can ride my donkey and Annie can ride your horse with a baboon. Then she turned back to Jack Nanny. Mustafa and I will walk alongside you. Thank you, said Jack. He was relieved to have someone else in charge. Mustafa brought the pack horse over and carefully lifted Kaku and Annie onto the saddle. Then he helped Jack onto the back of the donkey. Good, now let us go, said Florence. She blew out the flame in her lamp. Mustafa tied it to the saddle of the pack horse along with the canteens. By the light of the moon, Mustafa led the animals through the chilly night. Florence walked beside the donkey, staying close to Jack. They all traveled silently over the barren, stony ground until they came to the statues of the ancient pharaoh. The giants looked like faceless gray ghosts in the moonlight. As the group headed down the dirt road toward the Nile, Jack did his best to sit up straight on the donkey's back, but every step the animal took brought Jack more pain. Once or twice he couldn't help crying out. Jack, Annie called to him in a soft voice. Remember what it felt like to be rock climbers? Though the words might have sounded strange to Mustafa and Florence, Jack knew exactly what Annie meant. Yes, he breathed. He worked hard to remember what it felt like to be a great rock climber, to feel calm and centered. He tried to block out the pain in his arm and shoulder by closing his eyes and concentrating on the sounds of the night. Jack heard Kaku making a baby baboon noises. He heard the corn stalks whispering in the wind. He heard the baying of sheep and bleating of goats. As they came closer to the Nile, he heard the rustling of weeds and croaking of frogs. He heard the hee-haw of donkeys. Jack's eyes shot open. Honey, he said. Bunny, Annie called out. Is that you? Hello, I have your donkeys here, Ellie called, rushing forward. The travelers, they are safe. I am so glad you are safe too. Can you help us, Ellie? Said Florence. We must get Jack Nanny back to the Bracebridge's boat. Ellie quickly took the reins of the pack horse and donkey. Mustafa and Florence helped Jack Nanny and Kaku dismount. With Florence's help, Jack climbed onto the rowboat. Mustafa picked up Annie and Kaku and set them down next to Jack. Good night, Ellie, said Florence as she and Mustafa finally climbed into the rowboat too. Your grandfather will be back soon to take you home. Good night, Miss Nightingale, said the small boy. Mustafa's oars dipped into the water and the boat started gliding across the river. As he rowed, the guide sang his rowing song in time to the splashing of the oars. The Nile water sparkled, reflecting the moonlight. Jack loved the peaceful, mysterious feeling of the ancient river. When they reached the opposite shore, Mustafa tied the rowboat at the water's edge. Please help the children out of the boat, said Florence. Then you must hurry back to Ali. It is surely past his bedtime. Mustafa nodded. Florence turned to Jack Nanny. I will be back in a moment with Charles and Selena, she said. She climbed out of the rowboat and hurried away. Mustafa helped Jack Nanny and Kaku onto the grass. Thank you, said Annie. The old Egyptian nodded again. Then he got back into his rowboat and crossed the glimmering Nile, heading back to his grandson. Are you okay? Annie asked Jack. Fine, he breathed. He was in too much pain to say anything else. Jack heard voices coming toward them. Florence was hurrying down the river bank with Selena and Charles. Oh, you poor dears, cried Selena. And Kaku, there you are. Did the Countess come looking for her? Said Annie. No, she sent word asking us to keep Kaku for the night, said Selena. Oh, good. And couldn't we stay too? Annie asked shyly. We'll meet up with our parents tomorrow morning. Of course. Here, let me help you, said Charles, leaning down. Put your arm around my shoulder. Annie did as Charles said. He left her and carried her back to the moored sailboats. We'll follow them, Jack, Florence said kindly. Florence and Selena walked on either side of Jack, the riverbank, and Kaku. The Kaku clambered behind, shrieking and making noises. Jack imagined she was talking about the scary adventure in the dark hills. Finally, the group arrived at the large sailboat. Home, sweet home, said Selena. Into my cabin, said Florence. Charles and Selena helped Jack Nanny into the middle of the door of the cabin. Kaku followed and leaped onto a tall bed. Florence helped Jack Nanny Jack take off his long-sleeved shirt and belt and his hat. Now make room for the children, Kaku, Florence said to the baby baboon. Jack and Annie climbed onto the large bed, and Florence gently covered them with blankets. It's quite cold at night, she explained softly. She draped mosquito netting around the bedpost, and Selena lit kerosene lamps. Jack could smell the kerosene as the flames flickered and shadows danced on the green paneled walls. The boat rocked on the Nile, and a soft breeze came through the porthole. Though the gauze and the delicate mosquito netting, Florence and Charles looked like dream figures or angels to Jack. He closed his eyes, and finally he felt safe. Chapter 9, Heroes of the Dawn. Awoo! Jack felt Kaku's little hand on his ear. He opened his eyes. The mosquito netting had been pulled back. The baboon was perched on the headboard of the bed. He grabbed Jack's ear and tugged. Jack started to push her away, but to his surprise, his right arm was pinned across his chest. It was tucked tightly into a cotton sling. No, Kaku, said Annie. She pushed the baboon away from Jack. Florence Nightingale was sitting on the edge of the bed, wrapping a long piece of cloth around Annie's ankle. Hello, Jack, said Florence with a lovely smile. I hope you do not mind your sling. I maneuvered your arm into it while you were in a deep sleep. Thanks, he said. I'm afraid you dislocated your shoulder, said Florence. It will be less painful if you wear this sling. As soon as you get to a city, you must see a doctor. I will, thanks, said Jack. Florence finished pinning the cloth bandage snugly around Annie's ankle. There, my lady. Your ankle will heal as well, but you must go very slowly for a while, she said. She looked at Jack. Your sister received a frightful sprain, but I am happy to say she has broken no bones. Cool, said Jack. Florence tucked Jack's blanket tighter around him. There, soldier, warmer now? Jack was confused at first. Then he realized that Florence had thought he was cold when she said cool. He started to laugh, but it hurt his arm too much. Miss Nightingale, you are really a great nurse today. What's your secret? I have no secret, said Florence. I only have taken care of friends and relatives. As you heard from Lord Bickerson, my family does not allow me to work, but I would love to be a nurse. That is my greatest dream in life. It is why I found it so strange that you thought I was a nurse. And now, through entirely under circumstances, I have been a nurse to you both. Is that not a remarkable coincidence? Florence shook her head in wonder. Well, please excuse me, and I will pour you tea. Florence stepped over to a small curacao stone oven and poured water from a tea kettle into 2 cups. Good try, Annie, whispered to Jack. She still doesn't have a clue that she's great. So how can you share your secret of greatness with us? I don't know, said Annie. That is tricky. Here you are, said Florence, returning with 2 cups of tea. She handed one cup to Annie and then helped Jack take the other in his left hand. Jack carefully brought it to his lips. The hot tea and honey tasted wonderful. So allow me to understand what you told me last night, said Florence. You'll both risk your lives to save Kaku? Jack and Annie nodded. Florence smiled and turned to the baby baboon. Little one, I believe your 2 friends are great heroes, she said. Not really, said Annie. We're not like you. You are the great hero. What? How silly. Surely no one will call me a hero, said Florence. But they will, said Annie. I know you're not a real nurse yet, but someday you're going to be the greatest nurse in all time. Florence looked at Jack. Did you actually see your sister fall from the cliff? She said under her breath. No, why? Said Jack. I wonder, she might have hit her head, said Florence. She does not seem in her right mind. Jack laughed. Don't worry, she's fine, he said. What she says about you is true. We know it for a fact. Oh dear, perhaps you both fell on your heads, Florence. I appreciate your gratitude, children, but an ankle bandage and a simple arm sling should not convince you I will be a great nurse. Well, then what do you think makes a great nurse, said Annie. I have thought of that, actually, said Florence. I have to say discipline, quickness, and kindness. Annie slipped her hand out from under the blanket. She and Jack glanced at the ring of truth. It wasn't glowing. Good try, Jack whispered to Annie. It seems like you definitely have those qualities, Annie said to Florence. So why won't your family let you be a nurse? They mean no harm, said Florence with a sigh. They only want me to be a proper lady. They will allow me to care for sick relatives in some of their homes, but they will never permit me to work in a hospital. That's so unfair, said Annie. The world needs you. I don't believe the world needs me, said Florence, laughing. But then her expression grew more serious. I do believe, though, I need the world. What do you mean? Asked Jack. I just feel that I must do something good for the world, the poor and the sick. Florence's voice became strong and passionate. I must lift the load of pain from the suffering. I must do more than walk around the gardens, write meaningless letters, sit in drawing rooms, gossip about the neighbors, arrange flowers, and go to dances. One work must be for the greater good of all, not just for oneself. I feel I must do something useful for the world, or I will go stark raving mad. Florence's eyes shone. Jack and Annie glanced at the ring of truth. It wasn't glowing brightly yet. It was glimmering a little. Could you explain that again in just a few simple words, he asked. Let's see, said Florence. How to say it simply. She stared out the window at the Nile. Then she spoke very clearly. I truly believe deep in my heart that one's life should have meaning and purpose. Jack and Annie looked at the ring of truth. It glimmered more and more, then glowed like bright as a burning ember. Kaku shrieked and pointed at the ring. Annie and Jack both laughed. Annie quickly hid her hand under the blanket. Florence turned around. Did that sound funny? She said. She seemed embarrassed. No, said Annie. She paused. It sounded true. Meaning and purpose, Jack repeated. Do you think that's the secret of greatness? Yes, I do, said Florence. Do you agree? Yes, totally, said Jack. And we know you'll find a way to do it, said Annie. Trust us. A rooster crowed, then another and another. The first live dawn crept through the window. Listen to them all, said Florence. It's a brand new day. Yes, agreed Annie. The door to the captain swung open. Countess von Kensky stood in the threshold, wrapped in her red shawl, her dark hair falling in curls around her shoulders. Kaku, my baby, she cried. The baboon screeched, bounded off the bed, and leaped into the Countess's arms. The two of them waltzed around the room, the Countess's long curls swirling in the air. Jack, Annie, and Florence all laughed at the sight. Finally, the Countess put Kaku on her shoulders and looked at Jack and Annie. Oh my, she cried. What happened to you? Kaku ran away from Jacko, said Florence, and they rescued her from the top of a cliff. Oh my dear children, thank you, said the Countess. Kaku, you little rascals, causing these nice children to suffer so. We'll be fine, said Annie. Miss Nightingale has taken good care of us. Well, you are the best baby baboon caretakers in the world, said the Countess. I would love to stay and admire you all day, but we must hurry away. Our boat is leaving for Cairo. Say goodbye, Kaku. Say thanks to your wonderful friends. Kaku looked at Jack and Annie with their eyes and soft and grateful. Awoo, she said. Awoo, answered Annie. Goodbye, Kaku von Kensky, said Jack, waving with his left hand. Farewell, said the Countess. Then she and the baby baboon headed out the door. Chapter 10. Goodbye, Thebes. I'm afraid we should leave too, said Annie. It's almost time for us to meet up with our parents. Oh, yes, of course, said Florence. Where do you need to go? Across the Nile, said Jack, by the sycamore tree. We'll rendezvous there. Jack put his belt and his hat on. Good, said Florence. No doubt that Mustafa and Ali are already sitting by the river waiting to help travelers. We will shout for him to row across and pick you up. Thanks, said Jack. And you will need this too, said Annie. Annie, said Florence. She went to a small closet and took out a wooden crutch. I always travel with a few medical supplies. It's not much, but it should help you a bit. Great, said Annie. She took the crutch from Florence and used it to help her down from the bed. Jack climbed down too, careful not to just Liz right on him. As they followed Florence out of the cabin, dawn was breaking its rosy glow across the temples of Luxor. The anchored sailboats in the waters of the Nile. Charles and Selina were already on the deck of one of their sailboats. Selina was sketching the temple while Charles sat on the deck chair reading a book. "Good morning," they both exclaimed when they saw Jack, Annie, and Florence. "Say goodbye to our new friends," said Florence. "Jack and Annie are leaving Thebes soon." "Oh dear, we will miss these brave American children," said Selina. She put down her sketching tools and rushed to Jack and Annie to give them careful hugs. "Good luck with your injuries, my dears." "Thanks," said Jack. "Thanks for helping us," said Annie. "Goodbye, old chap," said Charles, shaking Jack's left hand. "And young lady, I'm sure you'll be leaping over barrels soon." "Right-ho," said Annie. "Donkeys braid across the river." "Look," said Jack, pointing to Mustafa and Ali on the western bank. "They are already up and ready for work," said Charles. The Englishmen stepped across the boat deck, faced the Nile, and shouted, "Mustafa!" He waved for the guide to come across the river. Mustafa climbed into his rowboat and pushed off and started rowing across. "Come," said Florence. "I'll accompany you to the water's edge." "Thanks again," said Annie, waving goodbye to Charles and Selina. Charles tipped his hat and Selina waved back. Then Jack and Annie followed Florence down the landing. In the growing dawn light, a heron was standing on one leg in the water. "He looks just like me," said Annie, hopping on one foot. Florence smiled. "There's more activity here than in the first hour of cool morning than any other time of day," she said. Men in robes and turbans were sitting under a palm tree smoking a water pipe. 2 women were bathing small children in the Nile. Some girls were spreading wet clothes over the rocks to dry. Jack heard someone shouting. He and Annie, Florence turned and looked back at the sailboats anchored offshore. Lord and Lady Bickerson were on the deck of one of their boats. They were swatting and yelling at the flies. "Poor souls," breathed Florence. "The flies?" asked Annie. Florence laughed. "I like you both very much," she said. "I think we could be good friends." "I think so too," said Annie. "Me too," Jack added. His whole opinion of Florence had changed since she had tended to their injuries so kindly and he had heard her speak about her dreams. "Ah, here's your carriage," said Florence. Mustafa had arrived in his rowboat. He pulled it ashore. Then he and Florence helped Jack and Annie climb aboard and take their seats. "Goodbye, Jack and Annie," Florence said, standing on the riverbank. "You must visit me if you ever come to England." Jack was sad to leave her, and even sadder to think they would probably never see her again. "Good luck with everything," said Annie. "Hold on to your dreams." "We will miss you," said Annie. Florence smiled her most radiant smile and waved. Then she turned and walked away. Mustafa used his oars to push off, then began rowing across the river Nile. Geese flew overhead. A pelican was perched on a crocodile's rock. The old Egyptian softly sang his song. The words were still impossible to understand, but Jack felt that he knew what they meant now. They celebrated the Nile and all the life around it, ancient and new beasts and birds. When they came to the other side of the river, Mustafa pulled the rowboat onto the bank, then helped Jack and Annie out. Nearby, Ali was talking to some travelers who wanted donkeys. He called to his grandfather. "Wait, please," said Jack. He fumbled in his pouch for the Egyptian money. He pulled out the coins and offered them to Mustafa. "These are all for you, please. You helped us a lot. You saved us, actually." The guide shook his head. "No," he said. It was the first word Jack had heard him speak. "I helped you not for money, but because you needed help. It would be wrong for me to accept payment for a simple good deed." "Oh, yes, I understand," said Jack. He put away his coins. "Thank you very much." "Yes, thank you," said Annie. "And please tell Ali goodbye from us." The old man nodded, silent again, and headed towards his grandson and the new travelers. Day after day, Mustafa and Ali helped people, Jack thought, and always with gentleness and dignity. "Come on, let's go. Quick," said Annie, "while no one's looking." "Right-ho," said Jack. Using her crutch, Annie hobbled to the sycamore tree. Jack followed her. When they slipped under the canopy of the spraying branches, Annie grabbed the rope ladder. "Oh, man, can you climb up with her sprained ankle?" Jack asked her. "No big deal," said Annie. "But what about you with your whole shoulder and arm?" "No big deal," said Jack. Annie propped her crutch against the tree trunk and grabbed the sides of the ladder and stepped with her good foot onto the bottom rung. Moving slowly and carefully, she started up to the top. "Ow, ow, ow," she said under her breath as she climbed. Jack watched Annie as she pulled herself inside the treehouse. Then he grabbed the rung of the ladder with his left hand. Then, "At least the sycamore tree isn't as tall as the oak tree in Frog Creek," he thought. Keeping his right arm still, he slowly pulled himself, teetering this way and that on the rope ladder. Finally, he painfully heaved himself into the treehouse. He was exhausted. He had no idea how they were going to climb back down. Ready, said Annie. She was already opened the Pennsylvania book to the picture of Frog Creek. Jack sighed. Yeah, but I don't know how we're going to explain your ankle and my shoulder to Mom and Dad. We'll solve that problem when we get home, said Annie. She pointed to the picture. I wish we could go there. Goodbye, thieves. The wind started to blow. The trail started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Jack's arm sling was gone. He moved his shoulder carefully. The pain was gone, too. He breathed a huge sigh of relief. He was happy to be home, and even happier that his arm and shoulder were perfectly fine. No more bandage, said Annie. No more sprained ankle. Jack and Annie looked at each other in wonder. Cool, they said together. I guess what happens in Thebes stays in Thebes, said Jack. Annie laughed. Okay, we have the third secret of greatness now, said Jack. He took out his pencil and picked up the piece of paper from the floor. Under the words humility and hard work, he added, meaning and purpose. Isn't that two secrets, said Annie. No, in this case, I think it takes two words to say one thing really well, said Jack. I'm glad to know that Florence's life will have meaning and purpose, said Annie. I didn't want to tell her this and freak her out, but she'll go to nursing school in Germany, and she'll be a great nurse in the Crimea, and eventually she'll be the founder of modern nursing. Whew, said Jack. Yeah, whew, said Annie. And you know who else I think had meaning and purpose in his life, said Jack? Who, said Annie? Mustafa. He worked so hard, but he wouldn't take money for doing the right thing. And I could tell he really loved his grandson. That's true, said Annie. Mustafa's life really did have meaning and purpose. I'll bet Ali grows up to be just like him, said Jack. He took the tiny bottle from Miss in his pack and put it on the paper. Then he looked at Annie. Your ring, milady. Oh, I forgot, she said. She pulled the ring off in truth and off her finger and put it on next to the bottle. Okay, let's go home, said Jack. I'm ready, said Annie. She led the way down the ladder. Jack followed. Wow, he said. This ladder is a lot easier without a hurt shoulder and a sprained ankle, isn't it? No kidding, said Annie. Jack and Annie started walking together through the Frog Creek woods. Hey, do you think our lives have meaning and purpose, said Annie? I guess, said Jack. We help people and animals, said Annie. Horses, pandas, penguins, polar bears, dogs, elephants, kangaroos, koalas, baby baboons. I'll tell you one thing, Jack interrupted. Right now, my life is only one purpose. What's that? Asked Annie. To go home, sit on the front porch, read my book, take notes, and drink lemonade, said Jack. Home, sweet home, said Annie. Home, sweet home, repeated Jack. And he and Annie hurried home through the summery, good-smelling, bird-singing, shadowy Frog Creek woods. Author's note. Florence Nightingale traveled through Egypt as a tourist in 1949 to 1950 with her friends Selena and Charles Bracebridge. At that time, she was confused what to do with her life. Her wealthy upper-class family wanted her to marry and become a proper society lady, but Florence wanted to help others and become a good professional nurse. In those days, very few women worked in hospitals, and if they did, they were treated as maids. While traveling on the Nile, Florence became convinced that she should follow her dreams. On her way home, she visited an institute in Germany that taught nursing practices. Soon after, she trained at the institute, then got a job in London working as a nurse. A few years later, Florence became famous for her heroic medical work during the Crimea War on the Black Sea. She returned to England and spent the rest of her life working to help others by improving conditions in hospitals, organizing parents' care practices, and training nurses. Today, it is often said that Florence Nightingale invented modern nursing. Next time, I will be reading Abe Lincoln at Last.